After handing over the coin, Jawan turned his back without further explanation, saying only that it would be used when needed. So the boy returned to Korea and still took it out to see how it worked. Walking down the hospital corridor, Jaff flipped the coin over and over, but found nothing different about it. Suddenly, he heard a patient's parents calling out in the hallway as they talked, and the scene of the blood fog victim's family reunited was truly moving, making Jaff long for the moment when he would meet his mother and uncle Jawan again. From the other side, he heard a loud noise and the door burst open. Someone stepped on another person's neck. It was Tawan. The power he exuded felt as if he was in a deserted place, directly calling out to Jae, "I've been looking for you." Taewon's friendly smile only made Jae angrier. Without saying a word, Jae launched an attack straight at the kid. For the time being, Jae managed to block it, but the bouquet he had just bought flew out of his hand. The bastard laughed like it was a good season. I never thought an A-level apostle could block an S-level attack, but what concerned Jae more was what the hell this madman was doing in the hospital. Nurses, patients, and doctors quickly moved away as the two of them argued, with Tawan saying, "I know this place is where those suffering from the blood mist are kept, and I don't want them waking up and causing trouble. They should just stay quiet there." Tawan seemed to go insane, with a fiery fist striking straight into Jae's barrier. He gritted his teeth, using all the defense he had to resist. Two streams of power brought down the floor of the hospital. The glass shattered, causing a tremendous shockwave. At the same time, at the disaster prevention plane headquarters a few days earlier, Taksu came by to gather information about blood fog. The guy in glasses who welcomed him the day before was now apologizing to someone on the phone for not being able to handle the case of Virgo and Lee Jun. The voice on the other end coolly said, "Looking on the bright side, thanks to this incident, Virgo's reputation has clearly taken a hit." The man's voice grew serious. "That damn report is about to come back. Prepare quickly." Right in the hallway of the headquarters, the hurried footsteps of a pair of white boots drew closer. The owner of the white shoes barged in as if it were his own home, sharply asking, "What happened?" causing the other guy to jump in surprise. The saint of the Virgo constellation, Kivanazar, roared, "Why is that Leeson guy dealing with calamities under Virgo's jurisdiction?" To talk about the celestial body Virgo, it only appeared in chapter 55, but it is the strongest swordsman of humanity with the symbol of a crescent moon and a layer of silver bones. The one called Virgo, with the title of Commander of the Chilling Winds, is only capable of manifesting the powers of Virgo if they belong to a noble lineage and possess distinguished silver-white hair. Since Kivanazar took the lead of Virgo, the Celestial Body Organization has achieved many glorious victories. Day by day, the scale and potential of Virgo have grown to the point where it can rival Libra, the largest and most powerful holy order in the world. Kevin was born with everything in his hands, from a powerful background to immense talent and strength, all wrapped in a striking appearance. However, he was quite unfortunate to encounter many storms strong enough to shatter the pride of someone who has everything. A typical example of those storms is the name Lee Jun, which Kevin is currently shouting about loudly. "Why the hell is that bastard invading my territory?" Kevin stood at the door yelling loudly, forcing the office worker to explain why that scarred face was causing trouble with him. Kevin simply could not hold back any longer. "Any reason will do, but why does it have to be Lee Jun? Can't it be someone else? If only I had died in Devil Tower and was praised as a hero for 20 years like him, things would be different. Why does a guy like him suddenly return to attract the attention of the entire world?" The new followers were still taken aback by Castellan's outburst, but the old ones were already too familiar with it. The Virgo Castellan is famously known for having a deep-seated grudge against Lee Jun. Initially, they competed fairly, but then things gradually became more complicated. From fighting for the glory of defeating calamities, Kevin cannot compare to Lee Jun, all the way to the central position in major television interviews. Despite his scarred appearance, blind eyes, and bald head, he was still invited to be the center. Not to mention, no matter how much he trained his voice, Kevin's karaoke singing still couldn't match Lee Jun's score. Therefore, it's no surprise that he is now roaring. "Endure it." The man awkwardly bowed down to ask Castellan to calm down. The Sex Inquisitors were hunting for Lee Jun, but Kevin said, "Never. As long as that scar-faced guy is still around, I will personally go after him. I couldn't do it 20 years ago, but I can surely do it now." Kevin summoned a freezing wind that blew fiercely in the office. Just thinking about that guy made Kevin unable to hold back. A roar rang out, "Just wait, Lee Jun." That roar made the nearsighted man realize he had to intervene immediately. If this old man made it to Lee Jun now, it wouldn't be good. They needed to buy more time. So just as the Virgo Council stormed out, the guy said, "I have a list of potential locations Lee Jun might go to." He silently pulled out a pair of contact lenses, deliberately speaking for the other end to hear. He said he would guide Kevin to meet with the sex inquisitors in time. As soon as he hung up, Pirio had to act immediately before Kevin got to Jawan before him. At that moment, they had arrived at the temporary infirmary of the West Dome, ready to meet Jawan. The group burst in, pulling aside the curtains on both sides, and shouted, "We are the Sex Inquisitors. From the Virgo celestial body, everyone freeze." Unexpectedly, a voice yelled from inside, "Hey, guys, can you hear me?" The volume was as loud as 10 DJs blasting away the audience that had just entered. Hugo, with a flushed face, was holding a mic and shouting with a voice full of intoxication. Yankee received enthusiasm from the crowd. "Woo-ho! We're here, brother. We believe in you. 10 points." Encouraged, Hugo danced as if he were hosting a real concert and asked, "Do you all trust me?" Below, all were injured soldiers, yet strangely, each one screamed as if possessed, proving their loyalty to Sagittarius was absolute. Those weak Virgos and their kind. Riding the wave, Hugo began mumbling the lyrics to Shape of You with the lines, "I'm in love with your body. Oh, I. Adding a bit of excitement-inducing magic while drinking the small sun god ring whirled above his head, looking no different than at a bar. The crowd below was as if caught in a frenzy, chanting, "Sagittarius! Sagittarius! Show us your six-pack, brother!" The newly arrived Virgo celestial body had no idea what was happening, only feeling anger that Hugo Otter's concert was a place of moral decay, promoting obscene cultural products that needed to be completely banned. The knave orange-haired boy wanted to sacrifice himself for the cause, intending to jump in and cut across the six-pack content when someone's fist came in horizontally, threatening to dislocate his jaw. The punch sent him flying into a corner, causing everyone to gasp and shout, "It's Lee Jawan." One hand holding a bottle of wine, he was ready to throw more punches if any Virgo disciple dared to be unreasonable. The crowd's confidence surged thanks to the outstanding performance of the celestial body Sagittarius, coupled with a skyrocketing belief in his Ophiuchus constellation. How could Jawan ignore this? He cracked his knuckles, reminding the buzzing flies, "My business is going well. Don't interfere." The other guy had a swollen cheek from the punch, but was resilient. As he got up from the debris, he opened his mouth again. The Sex Inquisitors will never approve. Foolishly, he took another punch to the other side of his face, but this arm felt strange. It wasn't his. Pirio, a figure cloaked like a wizard, stepped forward to apologize to Lee Jawan. "Sorry for my rude subordinate." But Lee Jawan didn't know who this was, so he continued to chug the wine. Pirio introduced himself. "I'm Pirio, head of the Sex Inquisitors under the Virgo celestial body, and also one of the high priests." He asked to get straight to the point, opening directly, "We need your strength because we must break free from the tyranny of Kevin Ezar." The white shoes pounded against the ground, heading straight for the wooden door ahead. Kevin slammed into it with a frantic gaze, shouting, "Are you here, Jawan? Jawan!" Who would have known that this was just a bar? A crowd of bewildered people looked out as the stranger burst in as if he were escaping. The next time he barged through the door, Kevin added the words, "Sorry for the intrusion." Yet there was still no sign of Jawan or gone. Kevin stood outside, stomping his feet, not understanding what he was doing, wandering around aimlessly despite knowing the location. Suddenly, he had a realization. If I'm thinking correctly, then it's over. I've been tricked. Kevin abruptly fell silent, glancing at the office guy behind him, who was sweet-talking him into leaving to search for someone. He turned back with a scowl, his eyes boring into the other man, firmly stating, "Take off your glasses and show me." Unsure of what Kevin meant, the other man's contact lenses were suddenly cut in half right on his dilated pupils, falling to the ground in 4 pieces. In return, there was a loud scream of pain. Oh my God, who removes contact lenses like this? But what concerned Kevin was the notice board that had just dismantled the secret technique Wanderer's eyes borrowed from the celestial body of Scorpio. The subordinates were visibly confused. Wasn't that his skill that made others get lost? Why would that guy hide the secret technique behind contact lenses? Kevin looked at the bastard, clutching his eye in pain, and asked in a growl, "Are you trying to buy time to have the inquisitors of the committee find Lee Jawan before I do?" Pointing his sword directly at the man's neck, Kevin just wanted to know, "Where are the committee and that scar-faced bastard? I don't have time for games anymore, so spit it out." Depending on your answer, some parts might have to switch places. The frost gradually spread along the sword pointed at Kevin. Though representing the biting cold winds of winter nights, this Castellan had quite a fiery temperament. The vast domain of the Virgo celestial body under the blue sky exploded with a loud bang right in the main hall. The guards in tattered green uniforms rushed out, aiming to strike the troublemaker who was wreaking havoc. But under Lee Jawan's sword, there was only a dry armor that made a show of power. He dashed through, darting back and forth like a true ninja, attacking freely. The more chaos he caused, the more experience points related to Jawan's standing increased. He even received high-grade fabric, much to his delight. The others remained calm, viewing Jawan as if he were having a fit. However, in terms of rank, he wasn't inferior to Kevin, the Castellan of Virgo, so no one dared to touch him. Earlier, Pirio explained to Jawan that the Virgo celestial body is like a tangled mess. The apostles are divided into two factions because Castellan Kevin has lost trust due to his tyrannical personality. As the head of the Sex Inquisitors, Pirio has every reason to be determined to stop Castellan's dictatorial rule and needs Jawan's help. It sounds convincing, but Gart feels something is off. If it has come to the point of relying on someone from outside, the situation within the Virgo celestial body must be very serious. Not to mention, Pirio also presented the condemnation of the sky as a reward for Li Jun. In fact, the condemnation of the sky was his most advanced weapon from 20 years ago, which should have been lost at the Devil Tower since Li Jun didn't come back out. However, he increasingly feels that the witch Gemini's claim that his weapon is in the Palace of Virgo seems to be true. So Jian storms straight to the sacred relic storage of the Virgo celestial body after taking down all the noisy underlings outside. Pirio whispered when he saw Jian stop behind the door. This is the condemnation of the sky. But before he could open the door, Kevin had already run back, shouting, "Stop right there, Li Jian." Kevin Azar led his troops running as if chased by dogs, breathing heavily, but still extremely happy to have found Jawan looking cheerful. As soon as they saw each other, both of them laughed like old friends who hadn't met in a long time, truly understanding each other without needing to say a word. "Let's greet each other first. It's been 20 years, right?" He gasped through the lobby to Jawan, hardly able to hide his excitement. Always by his side was his friend Hugo Otters, but why did that guy look so strange? Noticing Pirio standing nearby, Kevin asked bluntly, "Oh la la, a traitor brought Li Jun in here to take me out, right? Planning to team up and ambush me from behind? I'll kill each one of you." But when Kevin's gaze fell upon the guards on the left who had been beaten to a pulp, he froze. Damn it, what is this? Suddenly, Kevin fell silent, causing everyone else to quiet down as well. Then he roared, "Who is it? Who is responsible for my temple being in this state?" Kevin's shout carried so far that others could hear it too. Even Hugo Otters, who was buzzed, understood what Kevin was saying, and so all three pointed at him, indicating, "It's him, the culprit is right here, boss. No wonder they let us wreck Virgo's mansion without stopping us." Identifying the target, Kevin's fury erupted like a strong wind blowing violently. He roared again, "It's you. You've given me another reason to take you down. Take this." Kevin's brilliant sword swept through the air, unleashing a cold blast that sent everything from his position and his opponent flying, crashing out and exploding the wall behind them all. But strangely enough, before Kevin was a roaring flame cutting through his frozen block, carving a large hole with water dripping. Hugo Otter's drunken voice rang out, "Hey, you prince, you owe me. Before fighting Jawan, you have to fight me." He was bursting with fire, but his face was still engulfed in drunkenness. At the crucial moment, he rushed out demanding a fight. That's really something. The news of Hugo regaining his strength had certainly reached Kevin's ears. But if you think he was afraid, you'd be wrong. Kevin was even more aggressive. "Oh, I'm so scared of you. See anything on my index finger?" In his drunken state, Hugo Otters pulled out 3 holy artifacts, including the terrifying Axis arrow from his arsenal. With his inner strength, he looked just like a true blacksmith. True to his word, Hugo Otters grabbed an Axis arrow in his left hand. Ha! He threw it straight at Kevin's face, aiming to pin his white hair to the wall. But Kevin, in his proud way, welcomed it and raised his sword high. "Is that all you've got to fight me?" With a single swing of his sword, Kevin easily deflected the Axis arrow off its path. But Hugo Otters still had 2 more. As Kevin looked up, he saw the second one just a few centimeters from his face. A thunderous explosion blinding to the eye, but it didn't sober Hugo Otters up at all. He clenched his fist and shouted, "It's a direct hit." Gart felt very embarrassed to see his boss looking no different from a bunch of drunkards at a bar, all aggressive. Meanwhile, Jian found it perfectly normal, so he just stood in one place, listening to his phone. It was unclear who was on the other end of the line, but they seemed to be familiar. Jian said, "I'm in front of the Virgo relic warehouse. Hurry up and come here." Kevin Azar was not one to easily give in. He leaned his sword down, standing amid the wreckage and smoke. He said, "In general, it's all set. Successfully pissed me off already." At this moment, Jian suddenly appeared, asking for some airtime, brandishing his weapon. "If you like, split it in 2. If you don't, merge it into 1. He arrogantly declared, "Get out of the way, you all." Kevin burst out laughing, clearly enjoying himself. He wouldn't let his subordinates intervene and told them, "This is a battle for adults. Children just watch, okay?" The two faced off. Kevin said, "I've been waiting 20 years to take you down." Kevin stomped his foot hard on the ground, moving in the opposite direction from Jen. Both charged toward each other. clashing directly and creating blinding light. Jim hesitated slightly when he realized that this silver-haired kid could block his attack. To answer his question, the system reminded him, "Strength enhancement takes a day, my lord. It's only at 76% now. What do you expect?" Recognizing that Li Jun was distracted for a moment, Kevin smiled. Under the silver sword, he asked, "Why is it so hot? Kid, let's cool things down a bit." Cold air from Virgo suddenly filled the atmosphere, weaving through every strand of hair, freezing Jawan's S-grade scythe, causing it to shatter and push Jawan back. He launched another move at lightning speed. But with his slyness, instead of blocking the attack, Jin ducked to avoid it. How could he defend against his dirty tricks? Kevin charged forward with his sword in hand. What the heck? He just got hit by a stolen pair of slippers from somewhere in Belgium. Jin sprang up, deflected Virgo's ice sword, then spun a few times to dodge the incoming blade. When he could no longer evade, Jin stood there, pulling something out from his armpit. He received Kevin's sword strike with a kind smile. Kevin lunged, but Jin delivered a massive blow just as Kevin swung his sword, easily smashing his strike down to the ground below. Under the weight of the hammer artifact, Kevin's sword was left with only the hilt. He stood frozen in shock as he saw the holy relic appear, thinking it was still in Sergeevich's hands, wondering how it ended up in Jian's possession. Hesitating for a moment meant receiving a loving kick from the cheek. Jian burst into delighted laughter, thinking while he struck, "What are we going to eat tonight, kid?" Virgo struggled to maintain his balance, stamping both feet on the floor, yet he didn't get angry at John's kick. On the contrary, he broke into a joyful smile on his battered face. It's true that Li Jun is a familiar dog. Not wanting to waste any more time, Kevin dropped his useless sword. A sparkle of eagerness lit up his eyes as he pulled out something glowing like a neomite. The ice sword that was just drawn caused the air around to swirl, emitting wild, shrill sounds. Hugo Otters also snapped out of his drunken state, mumbling, "It's awake now." Jawan was thrilled to see Virgo's real weapon. "I was already bored when I saw this guy using a sword earlier. Turns out the exciting part comes out now." Kevin didn't deny it, as this was not something one could just pull out at will. The royal artifact, the ice sword, revealed itself with a distinct transparency, adding to Kevin's majesty. He glanced at Jawan, squatting like a frog, and asked, "Hey, kid, can you move? My ice sword doesn't just freeze the air, it also deals with your artifact." Jawan's limbs were locked tight, just as Kevin wanted. He laughed heartily. 20 years of being in prison, and now you become weak, huh? Take my ice sword and wake up." Kevin's sword thrust straight through the object in front of him, splattering blood everywhere. A cry rang out, causing the two centaurs to howl, "Ouch." No one noticed that Jawan had appeared behind them. As soon as he realized it wasn't Pirio, Jawan charged forward once more. The one stabbed by Kevin was definitely not Jawan. That person was coughing and in agony from enduring a terrible freezing strike from his own Castellan. Seizing the opportunity while the group was still in shock, Jawan grabbed the hammer artifact and yelled, "I knew this guy was a fraud." At that moment, Pirio realized that somehow Jawan had seen through Virgo's trust level of only 3%, while Libra's devotion was at 97%. Both of you get lost, home run. Both Virgo's master and servant were slammed away by Jawan's hammer, crashing far into the ice that Kevin had cast earlier. Jawan's eyes sparkled with joy as he recognized that those two had smashed the door into Virgo's storage room. Before them was a block of ice securely chained. The light from outside glinted off the ice. Jawan immediately recognized it. It was the condemnation of the sky. His beloved was calling its master. Kevin struggled to get up, and before he could lift his head, he cursed at Jawan. Jawan, you bastard." Hugo Otters stepped forward and said, "Why are you so funny? Betraying my friend in Devil Tower and now getting betrayed by your subordinate." He looked up with a bewildered expression. "What do you mean, man? When did I betray Li Jun?" Hugo Otters angrily criticized Virgo to his face. "It's you. You set a trap for Li Jun and stabbed him in Devil Tower." Kevin stood up abruptly, ready to argue back with Sagittarius. "How dare you slander me?" The two sides argued for a long time, further enraging Virgo. In his life, the thing that angers him the most is having his dignity humiliated by others. So just that amount of words was enough for Kevin to go wild and throw a punch at Sagittarius. But his action suddenly stopped. The arm holding the ice spear was tightly bound by Pirio's cords. The guy behind laughed mockingly. "This is exactly why we should have ended everything since the blood mist incident." Clearly, what bound him was the golden skill, the law of Libra. Kevin's eyes widened, not understanding. How can a Virgo follower have this skill? As if to answer his question, Pirio took out the sacred object, the balance of justice of Libra, and activated the equivalent exchange skill. One side of the scale appeared right under his feet, creating 3 chains with Kevin at the center. Hearing Pirio shout, "I offer up to the Saint Virgo, Kevin Azar." Red light slashed down from the sky. Virgo struggled, but could not escape the vines, which only escalated the situation. Cold sweat dripping, Kevin decisively activated his skill, Frost Winter, and struck his locked right hand hard with his left. In an instant, red blood splattered before the astonished gaze of the betrayer apostle, Perio. Surely Perio could not have anticipated that the Saint Virgo would resolutely sever his own hand like that. Kevin's subordinates hurriedly rushed to support their Castellan, as he nearly fainted from the pain. Although he managed to escape his body, the arm was enough to serve as a sacrificial offering on the scale, which made Perio laugh with delight. At least witnessing the twisted face of the Virgo in agony was enough to pique his interest. Kevin immediately used ice magic to embrace the wound and stop the bleeding. He tried to retreat to where his subordinates were supporting him. Equivalent exchange on the Libra's scales immediately regarded his arm as a sacrificial offering, opening up a mystical space swirling violently on the remaining balance. Perio wanted to use Kevin's entire body as a sacrifice, conveniently eliminating this saint as well. But even just the arm was enough to serve as a tribute, so he had no fear of Hugo Otter's side with their bows drawn. Jawan raised his hammer high, and all three launched 3 different types of attacks straight at the Libra scale, wanting to destroy it. But unfortunately, they were too late. All their attacks fell into the newly opened phantom space, with not a single trace of energy touching the crafty man in front. Behind the guy, the spatial crack opened wider and wider, gradually connecting with one another, turning the surrounding scenery into a barren area with a blood-red sky above. The ground rose up with what looked like monstrous hands, all pointing towards a temple, with more than 200 steps. A swirling wind overhead was filled with indistinct debris scattered around. In an instant, all 6 people were no longer in the Virgo palace. It had been a long time since Li Jian had felt uneasy because he recognized this unpleasant and murky atmosphere. Lost in thought, Perio stood on a high platform, looking at the group and laughing. This hellish scene is your collective grave. Virgo's subordinates were furious, 2 girls brandishing their swords pointed at Perio, shouting, "You bastard, how dare you cut your master's hand?" They raised their swords in an X shape, sparkling with silver light. Both swung their hands, unleashing a northeastern wind aimed to slice through Perio's flesh. However, all that could be seen was a thick cloud of dust created by the technique, while the wind made no discernible movement. The 2 were visibly confused, not understanding why Virgo's ultimate technique had no effect. Behind them, Kevin buried his face in his hands, moaning helplessly because he could not use his power. His hands trembled as he tried to summon it once again, but failed. Indeed, the connection with the ultimate deity had been severed. Gart realized that the Virgo saint was right. Even Hugo Otters couldn't summon any golden aura that resembled divine power. It was unbelievable. A mere follower could sever their connection to the gods. At that moment, the grotesque hands behind the 2 figures twitched as if stretching their joints, then slammed down onto the ground, forcing both master and servant to leap aside to avoid them. Perio, witnessing their helplessness, laughed gleefully. Let me tell you, this is the isolation space of the Libra Saint. Here, you won't be able to use that holy power you're so proud of anymore. His laughter grew more unrestrained as the people below struggled to fend off the hands attempting to grab them. In this place, no power existed. Even saints were reduced to mere mortals. Amid the chaos, one person, quicker than the rest, managed to escape, carrying a golden hammer on their back. Li Jian took a few steps, then suddenly launched himself out of the rubble, charging straight toward Perio. The man quickly drew the Libra scales, borrowed from some hidden corner, successfully commanding the magical hands to block Li Jian's path. Among the jagged, leathery surfaces, there were several red orbs, half resembling gemstones, half like eyes. Jivan stared at them, realizing that none of these were ordinary calamites. Struggling to hold on was already exhausting. The trader below mocked in a carefree tone. Why not greet your old friend? Don't tell me you've forgotten you've been friends with them for 20 years. Those are the ones who pushed you to the brink of death in Devil Tower, O hero. Grasping the words of that bastard Perio, Jian gradually pieced together the clues. Indeed, these guys are involved. The space began to fray, torn apart by bloodthirsty black-clawed hands. Quickly, the calamites squeezed in, searching for their prey. According to Perio's cough, these were indeed the calamites that appeared in Devil Tower. Here, they had heard about this traitorous apostle wanting to consume everyone. At the Orion Hospital, the sun was shining beautifully, but the atmosphere was gloomy, filled with thick dust. Sung Jae grit his teeth, one cheek swollen, silently cursing that damn Tawan who had blocked all his attacks. He laughed smugly, waving the vines, tightly gripping the fire mage's fist. Full of self-satisfaction, Tawan taunted. Indeed, the difference between A and S ranks is clearly visible to the naked eye. His fist rose again. You might be able to beat that fool Shiwu. With me, that's not going to happen. One punch from him sent the fire mage's hand flying, directly knocking Sung Jae into the opposite wall, creating a large crack before he finally stopped. Struggling to get up and coughing with the pain shooting through his back, Sung Jae suddenly realized he had been knocked into his mother's hospital room. He didn't know what to do, but Tawan's steps never faltered. As soon as he recognized that this was Sung Jae's mother's room, Tawan, the red-haired man holding the demonic tongue, rammed a punch straight into Sung Jae's stomach without mercy, causing him to cough up blood. Seeing Sung Jae writhing in agony brought Tawan immense satisfaction. He raised the demonic tongue, scoffing, "It's just a scroll that talks about how to use magical power, kid. With that thick-headedness of yours, it's no wonder you'll always be a loser." Having obtained the book, Tawan thoroughly humiliated Sung Jae. Then he swung his hand, conjuring a small burst of power that sent both the red-haired kin and his mother to the afterlife. The walls and floor shattered beneath Sung Jae's feet, the tremendous shockwave tossing both his mother and the hospital bed straight into the gaping hole. Sung Jae screamed until his throat was raw, utterly devoid of any magical power to save himself. Terror gripped his heart. He refused to allow himself to fall to his death like this. He thought of his generous uncle, his sharp-tongued older sister who always cared for him, and even his father, to whom he hadn't had the chance to say a kind word. Isn't there anyone to help me in this life and death moment? Sung Jae racked his brain, desperately trying to find a way out, interspersed with self-deprecating curses about his own uselessness. When Sung Jae saw his mother, who had not opened her eyes for 10 years, falling down with him, he immediately held her close and thought about how his father would never give up in the blood mist case. Tightening his embrace around his mother, Sung Jae told himself that he too could not give up. The determined words of protecting his mother rang out, and suddenly a notification popped up. "Congratulations, you have been recognized by the unyielding spirit of the Ophiuchus constellation. You are eligible to take the Ophiuchus constellation aptitude test, gain power, and fight against the enemy. Do you accept?" What time is it that the notification appears just at the right moment? Sung Jae shouted, "Anything goes. I'll do anything just once. Let me protect my mother." As soon as he uttered the plea, his entire body was enveloped in the light of Ophiuchus. Tawan witnessed the strange scene. He frowned irritably, not understanding how this kid still had magical power. The intense power of the Ophiuchus constellation surrounded both mother and son, helping him land safely without any aftershocks. The master of the Ophiuchus constellation was desperately resisting within, his four enormous arms trying to suffocate himself. The Virgin Saint Sagittarius and the Apostles were all stuck in a similar situation. Periel laughed madly. "Finally, it's over. Damn it, I almost exhausted myself preparing for this day." The tightly bound group made Periel open his mouth mockingly. "What kind of singer are you? You're just a bunch of worms squirming around. If you're skill, then squirm some more." After cursing enough, he turned back to Li Jian and asked, "What about you? Are you holding on or giving up?" "Just give up. It's better that way." Maintaining his provocative posture, Jian chuckled. "Why is this guy talking so much? I'm so tired. Who said to give up, you dog?" His relaxed smile startled Pirio. Jian still had enough strength to grumble about those old days. "Even when my body is crippled, and I don't have the support of the gods, even when I'm alone fighting blood-red eyes, wandering alone for 20 years in Devil Tower, I've never thought of giving up. Who are you to tell me to give up here in this situation?" He tilted his head back, displaying his familiar smug demeanor. "These useless little punks think they can step on me. How naive." The more he spoke, the more excited Jim became, laughing loudly. "I told you to have less delusions. Don't delude yourself, you fool." Jawan's momentum terrified Pirio, who had to pull out the golden scale to command those mages to crush him to feel at ease. He said, "Let me fulfill your desperate wish to die," but inside he only hoped he would die soon to stop feeling scared. What a coincidence that in front of Yu Taewu was also the blue light of the Ophiuchus constellation. Sung Jae soared upwards, driving his fist straight into the face of the bastard, sending him flying a great distance. The blow dislocated the jaw of the blonde-haired guy, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood, and it seemed like several of his teeth were broken. As he landed, his entire body still radiated magical power, and Sung Jae told him, "Don't even think about saying the words 'give up' to me. I absolutely will not give up. I've grown too tired of feeling powerless without strength. My mother is still here, Uncle Jawan is still here. Everyone will be protected by me with these hands." Sung Jae's determined roar helped him overcome the identity challenge of the Ophiuchus constellation, officially becoming the first apostle under Li Jian. He, in the virtual space, also received the signal of the first apostle, opening a new chapter in the Li Jian Bible. From now on, every step he takes will be recorded by the power of the Ophiuchus constellation. The intense power radiating from Li Jian pushed the Calamites far away from him. Light like that from heaven showered down on the betraying Apostle Pirio, illuminating everyone present. Everyone was stunned, unable to believe this was the true power of Li Jun. The columns of light pierced through the entire hand, calamites from small to large, piercing through the barrier that had formed this world. He had lost the good pair of shoes he had gotten from Belgium again. Barefoot, he stepped firmly on each step, bringing himself to the terrified Pirio. His clothes were torn to shreds with each step of Jian. He used the recording power of the Bible to create his own legend. This was it, striding toward Pirio, without a scrap of clothing, but Jian had something more important to deal with than this useless fellow. Suddenly, he remembered the barrier was collapsing, exposing the inhabitants of the real world. The guy glanced at the condemnation of the sky behind him, ignoring the wretched obstruction. With a single push, Li Jian sent the guy tumbling backward, extending his hand toward the exquisite weapon, his 5 fingers grasping it lightly, effortlessly seizing the handle of the condemnation of the sky and casually flicking it, severing all the annoying chains around him. Pirio was starting to feel fear gradually. He couldn't have imagined that Li Jian could pull it out just with muscle power. He gripped the handle in his hand, smiling in amazement. Oh my! The feeling was as familiar as it had been 20 years ago. Strongly hoisting it up, he tapped it on his shoulder as a greeting. Li Jian felt extremely refreshed now that the condemnation of the sky was finally in his hands after a long time. It was one of the 8 great sacred artifacts in the world and was Li Jian's ultimate weapon. No wonder he couldn't forget it. As soon as he smiled, he said he had been chained for 20 years and probably had never tasted calamites. A hand suddenly reached out to grab him from above, but he didn't bother to turn around. He gently embedded it into the palm of calamites, causing extreme pain. The cold gaze of the superior glanced back in disappointment. Is that all you can do before stopping your attack? One hand wasn't enough fun, so 2 hands would help out. He swung his sword, cutting a straight line towards Pirio. A streak of light extended several dozen meters from where he stood, followed by a terrifying rumble as the ground lay open. Poor souls, those bound by the hands were thrown everywhere. But thanks to this move, the whole group escaped successfully. Kevin's gaze seemed to freeze for a few seconds as he realized John's attack split the ground all the way down to the deep lava flow below, rather than just plowing the surface above. The owner of the chaos was still smiling, enjoying himself as he asked the utterly terrified Pirio, "Are you going to squirm around for him to see? I'm not like your heavenly ordinary, you hear?" I don't like to give up. His sword, condemnation of the sky, looked like a decade-old antique, pointing down at Pirio, who was half lying, half sitting. Jian smirked arrogantly once again. You want to give up without saying a word? Grab the Libra artifact like a lifeline. The guy was trembling in fear, roaring. Everyone charged forward. The calamites in the shape of hands, as many as there were, all rushed toward Li Jian, only to concentrate their attack on him. It's simple. The slash shattered them into pieces, making it hard to recognize what they were. The surrounding space felt like it was being torn apart under his sword. However, what they did not lack was numbers. As Jian lifted his foot to jump, 1 calamite from above and 1 from below suddenly trapped him inside. Pirio, just standing up to witness the scene, had not even had the time to feel proud before he saw the light of the Ophiuchus technique shining through the gaps. It illuminated the area and distinctly revealed Jawan raising the condemnation of the sky with an expression of great delight. This feels exhilarating. It's been 20 years since my weapon has tasted the calamites. The thrill made Jian appear no different from the final boss in a horror movie. To salvage the righteous image of this story, Kevin plunged his blade down and initiated Summer's shooting star. Hugo Otters was not to be outdone, skillfully summoning Sky Radiance, as both created a magnificent whirlwind. It not only froze movements, but also purified the filth of the calamites. With the virtual space destroyed, the connection to the ultimate deity returned to normal. Both Apollo and Virgo appeared majestically above. The Phi shouted the slogan, "Virgo and Sagittarius have been resurrected." Jian had a frustrated expression. Why do these guys always act so tough? Do they think they are casting for the Power Rangers or something? Still posing. Hearing that, Kevin and Hugo Otters shouted back in unison, "Shut up." Pirio was terrified, wanting to quietly slip away from this place because he couldn't believe Li Jian could be that strong, but escaping so easily was out of the question. A scream from Pirio echoed as his silver-booted feet pounded down the hundreds of stairs. Kevin jumped up, using his other hand to swing his sword in retaliation for his missing arm. Pirio had no way to avoid the devastating slash. He could only watch wide-eyed as the cut sliced across his face. Kevin couldn't believe that his strength did not kill that jerk, but instead caused Pirio's skin to crack open in a bizarre way. Immediately backing away to examine it, he vaguely realized it was some kind of skill, not blood. Those things floated into the air, forming a talking head. I really didn't want to meet you like this. Once it showed itself, how could it hide its identity? Kevin recognized the aura forming before him belonged to none other than Jean-Louis Moraine. After a polite greeting, Moraine leaned down to whisper to Pirio, "Don't run away, you want to destroy them all, right?" Without waiting for Pirio to respond, Moraine let out an excited laugh, giving it another chance. He used his power to roll Pirio's flesh and blood into a gooey mass that soared high, along with the chopped limbs of calamites that had been severed earlier, all connecting together. Moraine's deep, hoarse voice echoed through the air. He is offering Pirio as a sacrifice to the gods, transforming him into a calamite to complete the mission. His mouth was tightly sealed, unable to utter a word of agreement or disagreement with Moraine. Using the Libra Bow's equivalent exchange skill, he surrendered Pirio to the scales, leaving no way to turn back. The Jawan group surprisingly stood by, waiting for the performance to conclude. He whispered, "Hey, silver-haired guy, that really is Pirio, right?" Kevin knew this guy too well. He was probably planning to come up with more painful nicknames. Sharp observation, huh? He asked the Virgo guy what he thought about calling him Pirio the Gigantic. It did look massive, and Kevin, feeling bored, responded, "I can't even understand how Hugo Otters puts up with this crazy guy." Both burst into laughter, pitying Hugo Otters. "Even if we curse, it'd just be one line. What else can we do but accept it?" Up there, the gigantic Pirio was being choked by those large and small hands, making noises like he was burping. Jawan was ready to wait for it to transform into whatever terrible monster it would become, as his body was continuing to enhance to 85% and allowed him to use his power once he surpassed the 80 threshold. Looking back at what happened earlier, just a light swing had released a powerful force. This time, Jawan wanted to test the new strength he had acquired and see how different it would be, so he waited for the Calamite's Pirio to finish transforming. He still held the sky radiance and struck lightly, but this time Jawan put more force into bringing it down on the monster's head. Suddenly, his tiny eyes froze, seriously observing his cut line with surprise. Outside, under the clear blue sky, Jin Mino, called by Jawan, stood stunned before a pile of ice shards, jabbing in all directions and covering the Virgo temple. He couldn't understand why Jawan had called him to see the temple in this state. Surely it's not to watch him fight the Virgo Castellan, right? Just as he finished speaking, the ground erupted upwards, causing the inspector to stumble back. "Oh my goodness, I can't believe it. The entire Virgo temple could fly like this one day." A young girl's voice appeared beside Jin Melung and asked, "Am I a bit late, or do I need to ask him if that explosion was from the Virgo temple?" Surprised, he hadn't expected to meet the girl there. They both paused their conversation and looked at the traitorous Periel, lying foaming at the mouth among the rubble. His bare foot stomped hard outside with a curse. "Is the enhancement so strong that it has come to this and I can't even control the power?" Jawan shook his hand in complaint. "With the enhancement only at 85%, how will it be when it reaches 100%? He wasn't accustomed to the new way his body functioned, so he didn't care about other things. But the master of the Virgo sanctuary did care. Kevin roared, "Damn, that crazy guy. You've blown away my shrine." The news of Pirio's defeat made the criticism of Louis Moraine fiercer than ever. He hung his head in shame and added, "I didn't expect Li Jian to bring those people with him." Hearing the criticisms from above, he didn't dare show his face in front of them, shrugging as if it was only natural to capture Li Jian. His response was 7 parts sarcastic, 3 parts irresponsible. He immediately received a snap. Louis Moraine's whole body was bound tightly by a golden chain, and he could only manage to kneel on one knee. He lowered his voice, looking remorseful, managing to change the bland words of Libra to, "I hope that sarcastic tone comes from confidence in your future success." The superior's face became even more pronounced when she asked Moraine, "Tell me, what will they do next?" The snap made the chain heavier, causing Moraine to gasp as he struggled to respond. Kevin Azar will certainly affirm his innocence, so the next place they will go is... Two close friends glanced at Kevin and asked, "Is it true that the one who harmed John is Scorpio?" He tilted his head and affirmed, "Definitely that holy man." Hugo Otters jumped over and grabbed Kevin's shoulder, shaking his head in disbelief. Haley would never do that. Trying to distance himself from this crazy blonde guy, Kevin reminded Hugo Otters, "Don't be foolish enough to believe her just because she helped deal with blood fog. Let me tell you, if I wanted to take down Jun, why would I sneak around Devil Tower? I would stab that kid right in front of everyone so that all could witness it." Glancing at his subordinates, Kevin instructed them to lead the way to the hidden artifact storage and went on, turning back to the two friends. "The knife that stabbed Jun in Devil Tower is nothing unfamiliar to me." The passage down to the secret storage was cleared, revealing a door leading down that remained intact. Leading the two of them down, Kevin said, "I have been quietly investigating for a long time to find the hidden enemy among the gods." As soon as he opened the door, Hugo Otter's eyes collided with something glowing purple. This was everything Kevin claimed to have found while researching the Scorpio constellation. All of it was related to an unknown civilization. Looking at the scattered items here, Hugo Otters knew that Kevin had every reason to say that the Scorpio constellation was very dangerous. They would eventually become the first threat to human civilization. That's not the case. The footsteps of the newcomer echoed loudly on the stone stairs, causing the three to turn and look at Kevin. Recognizing it was the eldest daughter of the sage Sagittarius, he asked, "What did you mean by that?" It is the truth that he spoke. The Scorpio constellation is indeed very dangerous. I just arrived here after coming from the Scorpio City. I have the help of Lord Haley, so I'm sure he is a good person. I saw him make a hasty judgment. Hearing that the young girl had come from the Scorpio City, Kevin eagerly asked, "Where is it located?" The stomach of the troublemaker was growling like a drum, making the group lose interest in learning more. They had to find something to eat. Outside the cafe, the sound of breaking plates could be heard. Both the staff and customers turned to see another glass being crushed in Lee John's hand. He had already broken several similar ones and continued muttering, "What the hell? Why can't I control my strength?" The sage Virgo shouted, "Stop that ridiculous strength testing nonsense already. Are you out of your mind? Crushing plates in someone else's cafe. Only Yoa thought her uncle was really cool. You can do whatever you want, just keep going." Blushing and speaking softly like this is definitely a sign of infatuation. Kevin shouted loudly asking Sagittarius how he was teaching his child, but he didn't dare to answer. Suddenly, the crazy guy Lee Jian stopped squeezing things and started staring at him, making Kevin feel uneasy. His hand reached out to grab Kevin's head and lift him up. It was also because his body had been completely enhanced, and the weak human form of Lee Jian was replaced by a divine one. So he just wanted to test his strength, and Hugo Otters quickly chimed in. "Let that white-haired guy sit still. Don't mess with him anymore." As soon as he finished speaking, karma hit immediately. Jin grabbed the heads of the two boys, feeling the power. In an instant, Hugo Otters became a joke in Kevin's eyes. Who said to sit still earlier? Why didn't you say it, but not do it? Seeing his uncle lifting the two saints up was like watching an idol show off his skills. Yoa chuckled sweetly. "So cool, I can't stand it." Just after throwing the two noisy ones aside, Yoa quickly added, "Haley has a message for Uncle Jun." He pulled out a box containing a wooden fountain pen that can't write lies, presented respectfully in a padded box. The appraiser jumped out and exclaimed, "Oh my goodness! This is one of the 8 great holy artifacts. I can't believe to see it here." As soon as he held it in his hand, the intellectual mission was immediately accomplished. It was as if it was a secretary genuinely recording the affairs of the constellation of Ophiuchus. Thinking back, Haley was the one who would hide or run away whenever Jen showed up. Why is she bringing this to me? Jen thought she hated him a lot. Rushing off the purple glowing things in the basement, Kevin knew that they really were related to the scorpion. He was tossed around, yelling, "Do you hear that? I told you so, didn't I? That scorpion witch is connected to an unknown civilization." The more he spoke, the angrier he got, and Kevin bluntly stated, 20 years ago, I even saw that girl playing tricks on you, taking advantage of your distraction to pour some strange substance into your food. I saw that trickery with my own eyes. So let me put it plainly. That woman is definitely the one harming John and no one else. Can you say something more convincing? What are you pouring into John's food that is purple? With a straight face, Kevin explained, "This is the supplement, you know. He said John always has to fight calamites with the body of an ordinary person without divine support. That's also why John can't defeat me, because he lacks strength. That's why a gentleman like me is adding the supplement to strengthen his body. You don't need to thank me for knowing this. Really kind of you." Hugo Otter stood behind, suspiciously asking, "Is there any difference between the supplement you put in the food and the poison from that girl?" Nelly interjected, "Do you need me to assess it?" Immediately, Kevin shot back with a harsh retort, "Who hired you to meddle in this?" The two of them turned to argue about the substance, completely forgetting the experienced inspector who stood there feeling utterly dejected. "Never mind those young Castellans," he sighed, expressing his apologies because the leader of the sex inquisitors, Virgo, was involved with other constellations. When that was mentioned, Gian sensed something was wrong from the very beginning. The guy in a position of great power couldn't even mediate or control anything. They had to call in an outsider for help. Who would believe that? Jin Myung nodded in agreement. From the start, Perio had anticipated tricks to pit Jion's faction against itself. Discussing it further frustrated Jian because all the information he had been investigating pointed to Virgo. They must have planned this for a long time to make all the clues so reasonably point to Virgo. From Sergevich being forced to speak up to that woman, Hiji, everyone had mentioned Virgo, and it matched up so well that at one point, Jian truly believed it. Inside the demon prison 20 years ago, he could not clearly remember if the person who stabbed him had silver hair. But if one were to go strictly by hair color, besides Virgo, there were still Libra or any saint with light-colored hair. remembering Kevin's straightforward words that he wanted to publicly punch Jawan in front of a crowd. He doesn't think Virgo is that person. So what should we do now, Uncle? He tilted his head to look at the girl. Keep the original answer and look for the Scorpio constellation. Although the clues are currently vague, Haley is definitely related to this matter in some way. The issue of passing the wooden pen through Yoa only makes him more suspicious. Suddenly, he turned to say he needed to meet his follower Sung Jae, causing Yoa to freeze. Hugo Otters, who was pouring health tonic into Kevin's mouth, also froze as if struck by lightning. He stammered and asked, "Hey, what did you just say?" Seeing his excited expression, he replied, "Do Cheon Sung Jae, your son is my first disciple." Hugo Otters shouted, and even Yoa became a hazy ghost questioning him. "Why is that, Uncle? Why did you pick that kid and not me? You mean you don't want to answer? Then let me go ask him." The girl casually tapped her fingers on the screen, continuously messaging her younger brother to interrogate him, her murderous intent evident and making Jawan terrified. He didn't want to create a rift between the siblings just to have a disciple. Unexpectedly, Sung Jae didn't answer, driving Yola even crazier. She increased her efforts, calling back and messaging incessantly to the point it seemed pitiful for the phone. But it wasn't that her brother didn't want to answer. Sung Jae's phone was vibrating on the ground a short distance away from him. At this moment, he was gasping for breath, finally able to make that crazy guy Taewoo shut his mouth, completely exhausted. He looked up inside, not realizing his sister was calling him repeatedly. A gray suit appeared just outside, praising Sung Jae. "Wow, you're really good. You managed to defeat an S-rank disciple of Libra." He was startled to see the nurse holding a magic book and expressed his gratitude. "Thanks for saving the trouble of subduing Taewoo." Disguised as such, when Sung Jae asked who it was, the person immediately deactivated the transformation skill borrowed from Pisses. The familiar square glasses appeared along with an extremely cool greeting. "It's me, the leader of Gemini, Choi Sung-hyuk." "Oh my goodness, why don't you just appear properly? Do you enjoy cross-dressing? Making such a grand entrance and being mistaken for a pervert who likes to dress as a woman made Hyuk very angry, insisting he was here to get that magic book. "Ah, sure, my bad. If you like it, just take it. What's the problem?" Sung Jae scratched his head in confusion. "I only intended to borrow it initially, not take it for good. If someone asks for it back, I'll return it." Having obtained the book, Sung Hyuk did not leave. He smiled mysteriously and said, "I still have many questions to ask, starting with what happened with Castellan Hyjin." Using the magic from the book, he summoned several teleportation circles to interrogate the traitor of Gemini, with several legs protruding from them, soon standing in a circle around Sung Jae. They wanted him to accompany them to clarify the situation. On the other side of the room, where the group of Geminis were gathered noisily, Uncle Jawan was gasping for air. It was unclear whether it was because his beloved nephew was in danger, but his eyes began to open, finally revealing the hospital ceiling. Sung Jae stood surrounded by a dozen people, his face darkened. He couldn't believe that the conference room he once heard words of worship in was filled with such people. From being a selfish person who prioritized his own interests, loudly borrowing money from others, or calling for him to run and bring down the supermarket to bury the truth, Sung Jae had gradually realized that this guy was not a good person. Now he was ready to call him out directly. The two sides officially declared war, neither side willing to back down. The gang showcased the spirit call skill of the Gemini sign, gathering the energy of the group and summoning a massive teleportation portal above. Sung Jae was not intimidated by the number of attackers. The power of the Ophiuchus constellation surged within him, making him feel more confident. Suddenly, power surrounded Sung Jae as if a whirlwind had swept through. He looked up and saw his strength being sucked away like the scent of food being drawn out by an exhaust fan. The Geminis questioned each other. Why is Sung Jae's power being pulled away? Suddenly, from the matrix in the sky, a hand burst forth accompanied by laughter. Hi, it's been a long time since I've seen such powerful strength, you babies." A being resembling a human but 5 times larger emerged from the formation, much to Sung Hyuk's confusion and extreme fear. "What is that? That's not the spirit we were trying to call." Although the outcome was incorrect, he remembered that Hyjin had once shouted in despair, holding her head. It surely was the entity she had once wanted to summon, but couldn't. The strongest first-generation fairy, Elysian, turned its aged face to see who had called it. It was also the moment the crowd of followers anxiously asked each other, could it be that the gathering of magical power actually summoned the Fairy King? Is it because of the power of the forbidden book in Sung Hyuk's hands? In general, no one knew why they managed to summon Elysian, so the old being had to speak up and explain. "The one who transmitted the summoning signal is indeed your Gemini, but what actually called me here is the strength of this red-haired one." He turned to ask Sung Jae, who was still bewildered about where he had gotten that tremendous power from. Furthermore, he bluntly stated that he wanted to have that power, even though it was under the protection of Gemini. Sun Helk was flustered upon hearing the Fairy King wanted to leave the Gemini altar, so he shouted, "How could that be? What the hell is going on with you, you brat? The connection with the Gemini deity has been cut off. Castellan has been missing for so long. What can be done now?" He is absolutely right. Sung Yup couldn't argue back, though he had to hold back his anger and seize the opportunity while Sung Jae and the old man hadn't formed a pact yet to keep the Elf King at the holy altar. Thinking that, he pointed directly at Sung Jae, demanding to deal with the kid. He tensed up, calling upon the power of the Ophiuchus constellation, gleefully provoking, "If you're skilled, come at me." Little did he know, a few minutes later he was like a deflated balloon, with no strength left to flaunt, looking awkwardly at his hands and feet for a while. Unable to figure out where his power had vanished, the old elf hesitantly asked, "How I sucked all the magic out of you. Is that really true?" Sung Jae yelled at the old elf, "Help me. Are you just going to stand there?" "Oh, sorry. We haven't reached that level of relationship yet. We've just met. We don't have a pact." The old man's face turned as red as a teenage girl's, making Sung Jae genuinely speechless. On the other side, Sung Helk was very pleased. Who was just boasting a moment ago? Why are you backing down so fast now? While he was bribing and hastily following Gemini to interrogate, the wall next to Sung Helk suddenly cracked, and then a guy with black hair charged through, barreling like a bull right into the head of the guy with glasses. The ground broke apart beneath their feet, and dust flew everywhere. That didn't stop Sung Jae from recognizing a familiar figure. Dressed in a patient's outfit with open buttons, he still looked very strong. Just after getting someone, he aggressively asked, "Who threatened my nephew?" As Jawan lifted his head, he heard Sung Jae joyfully exclaim, "It's really Uncle Jawan." Just waking up, he had already made a terrifying path from one side to the other, trampling the face of Commander Song too. How could someone bedridden for 10 years with no ability to walk possess such strength? But Li Jian had infused Ophiuchus energy into Jawan's soul, granting him the powerful regenerative abilities of Castellan. The two brats from Song 2 were excitedly discussing how they would charge in 2 against 1, who will definitely win. But there were 3 of us on our side. A figure swinging like a circus monkey landed right next to them, startling Sung Jae. To his right, there were a few more people. It was definitely the reinforcements arriving. Sung Jae laughed heartily as he watched them raise their flaming bows to threaten the Sung 2 group. If you don't want a hole appearing suddenly in your head, surrender quickly. Just when they were in danger, the space behind them distorted, forming a portal. A middle-aged man shouted loudly for everyone to retreat. The summoning operation had failed. Not allowing his subordinates to regain their composure, the portal sucked in everyone who was still dazed, even those who were knocked out like Sung Helk were hurriedly pulled inside. In no time, they had disappeared without a trace. Sung Jae finally dared to breathe a sigh of relief. It's finally over. Long time no see, Sung Jae. The familiar voice took him back to his childhood, when he was only as tall as Jawan's hips. Now, he was almost the same height as his beloved uncle. Sung Jae felt 1 level of joy, while the Sagittarius team member felt 10. The leader was finally awake and even knew how to catch trends, highlighting it with a radiant smile. Elysian did not join in the fun. His gaze fell upon the book that the cowards had left behind as they ran away. Just as he was enjoying himself, the call of both his first and last name made Sung Jae jump in shock. This voice belonged to none other than his sister Yoha, who was in the midst of a frenzy, trying to appear normal on the outside. Her words were anything but, as she abruptly asked, "Are you hiding something from me?" "I'm not hiding anything from you." Upon hearing Sung Jae's denial, Yoha became enraged. "Don't lie. I've heard about Uncle Joan's disciple. Jawan knows nothing, yet he had to jump in to save that kid." Uncle rushed out, raising 2 fingers in a greeting. "Hello, your uncle is awake now." This successfully diverted Yoa's emotions. Elysian was seeing the red-haired kid act strange for the first time. Earlier, during the fight, he didn't seem as scared as he did now. The old man whispered, "If you want to run away, then make a pact with me. I'll transfer you to the sacred altar through you and then help you disappear. That way, both of us benefit, right?" Thus, the pact between the first-generation Elf King and Sung Jae was established. The old man moved from Gemini to Ophiuchus swiftly, giving the boys some power and taking off in tears before being beaten to a pulp by the lady. Yoa turned around to call Sung Jae, but missed the chance. The boy jumped down and teased, "Nainia, you were born before me, but not the first apostle of Uncle Jian." Just as Sung Jae landed with a big smile on his face and was about to run away, he suddenly froze. Even Yoa, who landed afterward, was surprised. Her gaze met 2 people in the corner of the wall who looked just like her brother. Yurin happily gazed at the recovering lady and recognized the 2 kids. Hugo gently tilted his head and called out, "Sung Jae, Yoha, are you both okay?" Is it quiet at the Scorpio hospital? The Virgo area is generally bustling. The people following Kevin gathered at an ancient teleportation station, waiting for their turn as it required enough people to operate. Kevin explained it's not as effective or popular as the Gemini portal, and Li Jian waved his hand, not wanting to hear more. He was waiting for his friend to receive a phone call from a girl boasting. Mom has woken up healthy with no strange symptoms at all. Tears of happiness streamed down Hugo Otter's face. It had been a long time since he cried so freely. Meanwhile, Yoda also recounted the story of the Gemini constellation being chased away by Sung Jia and the Sagittarius group. The kid Taewoo temporarily vanished. Jian did not recognize that name. When Garp beside him mentioned that it was the eldest son of Libra, he finally understood. Mentioning that guy made Hugo Otters understandably angry because 10 years ago, after the Blood Mist incident, he had discovered that the culprits were the two sons of Libra. In the midst of the sorrow of losing his wife and subordinates, Hugo Otters still had to brave the rain to confront the resort. He asked directly, "Is it true that she covered for him? I have all the documents she concealed. The goods brought into the airport were transported by Libra, and the two sons are on the passenger list, which has been verified by surviving witnesses." Hugo Otters came seeking an answer from Libra to confirm whether it was true that calamities were caused by her son. The sound of raindrops outside made Ji Seo's voice so quiet that one had to strain to hear. However, his calm demeanor was evident without needing to see his face. A malicious glint flashed in Ji Seo's eyes as he retorted, "What do you plan to do when you are just a person with little remaining power, unworthy of the title of saint?" Hugo Otters struggled to suppress his trembling as she casually apologized on behalf of the boys who caused the unfortunate incident. "I will pay more attention to them in the future." That excuse made it impossible for Hugo Otters to accept. Ji Seo harshly questioned, "Isn't it true that you couldn't stop it? If Jawan had been present, would such a disaster have occurred? Don't you see your own failure in protecting the nation while Jawan was being relied upon?" Targeting the wound of Hugo Otters, Ji Seo placed the scales of Libra before him, forcing him to choose between two paths. "If you're confident enough, go ahead and reveal the truth to the outside world, or handle the aftermath with your own uselessness. You should forgive the children, they don't know any better. You're not children too, so you should understand, right?" She flashed a cunning smile, reminding him that she still remembered the names of the two kids, Sung Jia and Yoa, right? The way she said the names of the two innocent children left Hugo Otters frozen. His hand clenched the evidence with frustration. Ji Seo was blatantly threatening him, yet he found himself unable to resist. Bound by the choice of gain and loss, Hugo Otters ultimately made a decision that would affect today. At that moment, Castellan had lost his power, enduring countless hardships for the safety of his two children. He told Gart, "We must find the whereabouts of the Scorpion brothers at all costs to put an end to this." Jian realized that was why Hugo Otters sent his two children to different constellations, simply because since the power of the Sagittarius constellation had weakened, it could no longer protect them properly. Since Sung Jia left Gemini to become his disciple, Jian felt much more at ease. Curious to see the information board, he wanted to know what task the little one would have as a disciple. For someone like Jian, who was beginning to establish a holy assembly, the task was very clear. He needed to create a constellation emblem and appoint a commander at the SS level. While pondering who to appoint, his friend approached to summarize the situation. Jian's furrowed brow made Hugo Otters feel uneasy, and he quickly backed away after grabbing his head to test his strength. Suddenly, the crazy Jian asked Hugo Otters, "Do you want to come to my holy assembly and be my disciple? I'll make you a commander." Before he could answer, Apollo appeared angrily with a fierce gaze. He immediately issued a warning, "You bastard Jian, don't even think about eyeing someone who has signed a pact with me." Only after the two Sagittarians greeted and bowed to Apollo did he scornfully leave. Kevin shouted, "Why didn't you invite me to the Holy Assembly?" Just as Jian asked, "Do you want to join?" He raised his middle finger and laughed loudly. Not a chance, what a ridiculous idea. While he was pounding on that silver-haired brat, a notification came that it was time to teleport. But Jian continued to kick vigorously. Hugo Otters glanced over with a bored expression and sighed, "Damn, it's noisy, isn't it?" Carr found it strange and asked, "What's up with Castellan? He never shows his attitude like this. Is it about what happened earlier?" The girl was furious that her younger brother got to join Ophiuchus, and she angrily tapped away, unable to connect. Yoa demanded to jump back to South Korea to give her naughty brother a piece of her mind. She ran into Gart, who turned red and whispered, "I have a way to quickly take you back to South Korea." He awkwardly smiled and said, "How about we go touch the teleport together? I'll take you." Just when she was feeling good, Uncle Mang interrupted with something even better, giving her a whole book on teleportation as a gift. Of course, Yoa accepted it immediately, leaving Gart feeling unnecessary and forgotten, cursing like a frustrated virgin. Before leaving, Yoa double-checked with Jian Does Uncle John want to go to Scorpio? She then added, Scorpio is located in a separate area blocked by Calamites to the east and west. The only way to get there is to go through America, where the Leo constellation reigns. She instantaneously teleported to take care of her younger brother, promising to meet everyone in America, and then they would teleport to Scorpio together. Before she left, she didn't forget to call out Dad, Uncle, with a sweet smile, thanking both for their fight. She had seen them side by side in the blood mist battle. Oh dear, that face is so cute. Jan had to compliment his friend for raising such a good child. Hugo Otters eagerly intended to share his experience of having a child. Suddenly, his gaze collided with Gart's face, which was filled with questions in his heart. He hadn't asked at the time, but now he had to. Hey kid, did you sign anything with Yo Upright? Gart startled and dared not speak. Yes, I like your daughter. He was then grabbed by Hugo by the neck and dragged away. So on the platform, everyone was witnessing this group of customers splitting into two pairs and fighting noisily, while no one dared to move to the transport. Finally, all four of them boarded the gate to prepare for teleportation. Hugo Otters muttered, why do we have to bring this Kevin along, buddy, to prove his innocence, or what? Kevin's eyes lit up when he recalled having to wait until the day he could defeat Li Jian. Anyone who intended to eliminate him before he did would be stopped. By the way, Virgo raised his nose and laughed heartily, thinking about the bright prospect of defeating Li Jian, as if he weren't there at all. At the control station, when asked where the destination coordinates were, the group excitedly replied, Washington, D.C., USA, please. Let the Lion's Temple take us there. News that the Li Jian group was on its way to Washington, USA quickly became a topic of discussion at the Lion's Den meeting. They chuckled among themselves, insisting that they must prepare an amazing performance to welcome powerful figures like Li Jian. The next day, the arena of the Leo constellation in the USA was packed with spectators. In the center stood Stephen, dressed in black with red pants like a statue. As the sound of the announcer echoed, the centuries battle between Stephen Maker and Li Jian is about to begin. Stephen Maker walked amidst the thunderous cheers of the audience. He didn't understand why he was here, even questioning who he was. On the opposite side, a guy in a t-shirt approached, looking somewhat slow-witted and even yawning, which left Stephen truly bewildered as to why he had agreed to show up in this place. A few hours earlier, in the capital of the USA, when the Li Jian group arrived at the sacred ground, they immediately marveled at the imposing statue of Stephen Maker striking a cool pose on a lion. The four of them huddled together and whispered, this guy can be self-satisfied, but is it really too much? Little did they know, the white-haired one behind them was trembling in excitement and exclaimed, it's incredibly cool. When we get back to the Virgin Territory, we must get something just like this. As he was about to tell the kid not to learn anything decent, suddenly there was a loud chorus of voices calling out, look, it's Li Jian. A group of people holding banners and flags excitedly said they came to welcome Li Jian to meet Stephen Maker. Why are four of us only here to pick up this guy? Kevin complained, only to be swiftly pulled away from the stage by Hugo. But how could they escape the gazes that began to speculate? On the left is Kevin Azar. On the right is Hugo Otters. Indeed, Li Jian is teaming up because he knows he can't compete with Castellan on his own. While lost in thought, the other guy was angrily kicked by John. Don't provoke him. These trivial guys must be targeting his weapons, right? The other person hurriedly ran over to intervene, presenting him with a letter sealed with wax that looked extremely official. I am here to invite Mr. Li Jian to the Lion Constellation Arena. The arena he mentioned spans all over the United States, with no rules regarding gender, nationality, race, or age. Anyone who wants to can step onto the stage to prove their strength and determine the strongest. Quietly having the unconscious attacker taken away, the other guy began to kneel down and introduced himself vigorously. The Holy War is always crowded because of the presence of the saint. The last match took place 30 years ago, and it was also the only match between Stephen and Jian. We are here to ensure that the participants will show up and recreate that classic battle once again. At the headquarters of Leo in the US, all kinds of rooms and equipment are available. Stephen's voice of surprise rang out, what did he mean fighting Li Jian, who decided that on their own? He had just done dozens of deadlifts. Before he could drink his way shake, he heard the shocking news and stopped immediately. Who else but this guy Oliver would take such initiative? Now he had the audacity to shout, Castellan, just focus on getting into the ring. I'll take care of the rest. To convince him further, everyone knows about Stephen getting tossed around by Li Jian in the Philippines. It was so embarrassing, and this is the perfect opportunity to turn the tables. Listening to Oliver rambling on about making history right 30 years ago, Stephen couldn't find the energy to respond. Sure, at that moment, Stephen was declared the winner, but he did want to revisit it. In his ear, Oliver kept nagging, Li Jian has agreed to fight Castellan. We got many politicians and economists on board. He even noticed the terrified expression on Stephen's face. The more he heard, the more afraid he became. Finally, he yelled, his mouth open as if he had seen a cockroach in the bathroom. Thus, the historic match was about to take place amid Stephen's gloomy aura as he sat in a corner like he was in penance. He didn't say a word, leaving Oliver to shake his head. This is truly a top-notch match. Turning back, he pointed at himself with authority and encouragement. But why? Stephen thought this guy had no credibility around here at all. He couldn't tell if he was looking for an excuse to get revenge on him. Unable to take it anymore, Stephen stood up and left. What else was there to ask where he was going? He was too angry, turned around and said, "I'm going to the restroom. Is that okay? Are you coming?" Oliver muttered, "I thought he was going to hide." But as Pastellan's figure disappeared around the corner, his overcooked beef lips curled into a cunning smile, as if everything was part of his plan. Stephen indeed went to the restroom, washing his hands under the faucet for a long time. Suddenly, he saw Li Jian in the mirror, his face full of displeasure, looming behind him from who knows when. Just seeing Jian standing next to him was enough to terrify Stephen. He must have known, since he called out "Golden Fur Cat" in a deep voice, making him almost burst. What conspiracy is going on? Do you think you can handle this battle? Just as he was about to shout, he suddenly realized he should look at this differently. So he unexpectedly smiled and gently said, "Your death 20 years ago is what's hard to bear." What did that mean? Bringing that up out of nowhere? Li Jian found it strange and turned to ask, "Back then, you were the symbol and spiritual pillar for humanity to believe they could defeat the Calamites, so the news of dying in Devil Tower really shocked them. I can believe it that year, but I had to accept it in sorrow." Wait, stop boasting there. The scene of Stephen crying for himself had no impact on Li Jian. But for Stephen, it was a reality, as his belief was that one must never let people see the saints show signs of collapsing. Looking at himself in the mirror, Stephen clenched his fist, acknowledging that he was the necessary villain in all films. There was no need to appear noble and pure. This fist of his would support humanity, for nothing worried Steve more than the thought of humanity falling into despair. So, being scolded for being useless was all right. Suddenly, Stephen broke into a gentle, bright smile, accepting that he could bear any burden as long as those calamities disappeared. This kind of enthusiasm made it easy to see the chilling tone. Li Jian wanted to quickly cut through that moment to hear what the golden-haired cat, clinging to the pants, was saying. Goodness, how can this guy listen so much and still not understand? Stephen had to get straight to the point, awkwardly saying, "Can you just watch this match for entertainment?" Ignoring John's angry expression, he tried to explain a bit. This match was merely a formality to select a fighter against the calamities. As Stephen's lips became drier from talking, John's anger became more evident. He was too bored to listen anymore and bluntly stated, "I'm really pissed off. I'm done having fun. I just want to go home." Stephen paused, realizing the match was over. With his eyes shimmering and filled with panic, he turned back and tearfully asked, "Is it really that difficult to just ask for a draw, my friend?" That was before the two faced each other in the Lion Arena. The speaker echoed in his ears while Stephen had to inhale and exhale, trying to maintain his composure. Glancing back at the crowd waiting, Stephen tried to believe that Jian would keep his word to cooperate with him. Sure enough, the announcer's voice rang out, "Jian has proposed to fight against the fighters all at once so that everyone has a chance to showcase their flamboyance." At that moment, Stephen felt lucky. Jian agreed with the simple condition, to bring deserving opponents to fight against the Calamites, and he immediately accepted. He thought Li Jian was cunning and would definitely want to use numbers to distract the viewers. From there, he would use a little trick to turn it into a match where everyone could joyfully participate, focusing more on the event than the outcome. In this way, both Jian and Stephen would benefit by freely unleashing their strength, contributing to an engaging match to please the fans. But an unexpected event occurred. Suddenly, the MC announced the footage of the fight between Li Jian and Stephen 30 seconds ago will be broadcast on television right now to heat up the atmosphere. As soon as it started, the scene of the lion punching Jian squarely in the face was chosen right away, sending him flying across the widescreen. Stephen, feeling flustered and startled, explained, "Oh, come on, you have to believe me. I didn't tell them to play this scene. It's a technical error." Looking at Li Jian's face, did it seem like he believed it? His gloomy expression was like a winter monsoon breeze sweeping through, casually letting slip a few words. "You know how to make me furious." This was bad, really bad. Stephen felt like the lion inside him suddenly collapsed. There was no saving this situation now. Meanwhile, the screen continued to show Jian getting beaten without end. He pointed at Stephen and roared, "What the hell? Why do you keep rewinding it? I deliberately lost to get the money." Stephen snapped back, equally furious. "What's so funny about you? I can't just replay it after paying $5 billion, damn it. Everyone has already heard. Now they're gossiping about the $5 billion behind your back." Panicking, Stephen went berserk and shouted, The match has started. Go in and fight, guys. So the whole group aimed straight for Li Jian, planning to gang up on him all at once. But unfortunately, they couldn't even touch his toenails. With his hands still in his pockets, Jian leaped far away, kicking off the battle, but the earlier argument had already reached the audience's ears. Hugo Otters had never heard of a friend taking money from a lion, but he must have gone off to collect funds by now, right? But here, Kevin could not accept it. He roared, "This is unacceptable." Drawing his sword, Virgo shouted, "Why does that dog Jian prefer to fight these guys instead of facing me? If he wants money, he'd just ask me for it." Finishing his sentence, Kevin leaped down into the arena, ignoring the centaur's futile attempts to hold him back. So Hugo Otters and Gart, each on one side, sprinted to stop the white-haired guy from causing chaos in the battlefield. In the eyes of the Lion Holy Assembly, it appeared that his action was a conspiracy with Li Jian, fearing defeat and charging into battle at once to play dirty. They shouted that they must charge into the port, causing the betting crowd to scream. Who allowed you to rush into the battlefield? The entire competition area suddenly turned chaotic. In this unique situation, anyone who knew how to fight rushed in. Those who ran faster got hit right in the face by a stranger's foot, making Kevin very angry. Those who blocked him from fighting Li Jian were ready to abandon their holy images and fight without mercy. Online viewers screamed loudly in the live stream comments, "Holy shit." When the Holy Virgin appears, who dares to stop the protection? Let's just fight. In an instant, the arena was in chaos, with one side fighting the other, and neither side willing to back down. In the VIP room, observing the situation clearly, I was about to turn back and ask Commander Oliver what he was planning to do. I couldn't see him anywhere. Alone, Oliver stepped down into the hallway, muttering to himself, "Damn it, why is everything so complicated?" Just as he decided to proceed to the next step, Yoa, who had been waiting there for a long time, suddenly asked back, "What are you planning to do?" Oliver jumped as if he were a thief caught red-handed. He shouted, "Deputy Castellan, where are you going while this extremely important event is happening?" Yoa squinted her eyes at the foolish man in front of her and retorted, "You know very well where I'm going and what I'm doing. Why ask me that?" She continued, "Why would you remember what you assigned me?" Oliver was increasingly flustered as if he really had forgotten. Yoa concluded for both of them to realize the issue. Since when did Oliver start talking to me politely? This can't be the real Olympia, because she never says anything without cursing at me. Yoa boldly approached and lowered her voice to ask, "Who are you?" In the arena, chaos erupted, much like two gang factions clashing at the docks. The situation grew tenser, and no one showed any intention of stopping as Stephen gaped and called out to Oliver, "What the hell is this? What kind of choreography turned this battle into such a free-for-all?" Suddenly, where more than 10 people dove in to fight at once, a loud explosion rang out, throwing everyone back. Li Jian's punch landed on someone, and he immediately gathered information about that person's notable skills, making him fight even more fiercely. In just a few seconds, he kicked away 10 people toward the lion. He hit so hard that his hand was smoking with exhilaration. The Brimsword looked at Stephen and said, "Thank you to the sponsor for helping me collect an enormous amount of extremely useful data." His disheveled hair was soaked with sweat because Li Jian had run out of people to entertain himself with and would surely turn to him next. Jian used the excuse that the damn video had been released and he couldn't possibly let it go. Stephen gritted his teeth and retorted, "Is it because you wanted to gather data that you started fighting, isn't it?" Jian tossed away the guy he had grabbed and smiled, saying that footage was just an excuse. It turned out he had been toying with him like prey from the very beginning. Feeling mocked, Stephen became furious and summoned lightning, charging his massive body to demand a showdown with Jian. Unexpectedly, his nose took a direct punch, nearly distorting his face. Stephen was hit and flew back into the arena wall, rolling around for a while before he finally stopped. As he opened his eyes, he saw John's punch rushing toward him. Stephen had no time to react. He could only plead for Jian to spare him. The speed was too quick for him to block. 1 punch is hate, 2 punches are affection, 3 punches are fondness, but 4 punches are love. Stephen tried to brace himself under the relentless rain of punches, gritting his teeth in frustration. I never thought I would have to endure something like this. But what could he do if he didn't endure? Li Jian clearly knew that Stephen needed time to transform into a saintly form, which is why he kept punching without a break. While one was punching, the other was blocking, eagerly listening to the screams of the white-haired figure charging towards them. Kevin brandished his sword and roared, "Hey, let me fight too." But before he could reach them, 2 figures jumped down from the upper floor to braze falling. As Kevin recognized the familiar shapes, of course, those 2 recognized him as well, and it turned out to be the captain and vice-captain brawling openly in front of everyone. Yoa's jump onto Oliver caused the ground to crack under her red power, sending onlookers flying as she interrogated the unknown creature before it was torn apart by lightning. Indeed, Oliver immediately vanished as the transformation skill of the Pisces had been undone, revealing the SS-ranked Sylvia of the Pisces group. The foolish men of the Leo group shouted in disbelief. Oh my god, Captain Oliver is actually a girl disguised as a boy. How could they have seen that wrong? The angrier Yoa became, the harder she stomped her foot on the person before her, not noticing that Kevin was struggling to stand up shakily behind her. Every time I fight Jin, something gets in the way. It's so frustrating, isn't it? Not this time. He pulled out his sword, intending to jump over to Li Jun, when he suddenly noticed something strange about the ground. It turned out that the sword had somehow been embedded in the chest of a young man. In an instant, Kevin didn't know what to say, and the image of him stabbing the sword into someone's chest was being broadcast everywhere, becoming violent content prohibited for viewers under 18. Social media exploded, with comments flooding in, "The Virgin Saint has killed someone." Meanwhile, the chaotic battlefield also came to a standstill. Kevin felt like a child being shunned, desperately trying to justify himself. Oh my god, it wasn't me. Unexpectedly, the person he had stabbed remarked mockingly, "How could you be so perceptive?" The pale-haired figure slowly turned their head. Gradually casting a glance over, they saw the corpse continuing to speak. Kevin Azar truly has a keen eye. The light radiating from the corpse blinded those with poor vision. Then it emitted the energy of the Libra constellation. How on earth was the corpse stabbed by Virgo rising up? Surrounding them, murmurs of astonishment spread. Could it be that there is a Libra spy within the Leo ranks? Just by hearing the voice, Jin gritted his teeth and said, "Why is there evidence of her everywhere?" It turned out to be none other than the woman Ji Seo, smiling. Hee, hello Li Jian. Long time no see, right? After some small talk, they continued to praise Kevin. Amidst the chaos, you guessed that I was hiding in this body. Kevin Azar, truly a worthy opponent of mine. All eyes turned to the Virgo Saint. He knew he was being watched closely, confirming that no one knew he had accidentally stabbed the wrong person and had no idea the Libra woman was inside. Kevin Azar decided to smile and admit he did it on purpose, to get the best of both worlds, escaping the title of murderer while being praised as someone with sharp insight. Although there was some luck involved, it's better than nothing. She then shifted to Jawan, curiously asking, "How did he survive Devil Tower? This back and forth isn't pleasant." He spoke sharply. "Shut your mouth already. All these ridiculous tricks aren't like you at all." Hiseo was scolded but didn't mind. Even though she didn't want to see Jun, she had to admit he was indeed very strong. Looking towards Kevin, she asked, "What now? I thought you would stab Jun in the heart." He looked pale, not understanding why she dragged him into this. But then he quickly realized that his notoriety came from here. He shouted, "Who are you colluding with to dare to set a trap for me?" The mannequin in Ji Seo's hand laughed savagely. "Clearly, you have boasted about how you eliminated Li Jun. Everyone knows, so why are you denying it so quickly now? Shut your mouth." A terrifying pillar of fire suddenly rained down on her mannequin. The violent whirlpool made Kevin panic and shout, "Stop making noise. You already know what kind of person Thin Bitten is, so why are you still listening to her?" Was he still unscathed, without a scratch from the attack of Anma? Ji Seo turned around and grinned maniacally at him. "Your power is impressive, but to burn this body, that much fire is not enough. And your sword too, Kevin." She had realized he was charging toward her from her right side and directly took a strike because she had prepared for it, successfully making Su Nu flinch in disbelief. His sword pierced the shield shaped like a balance. Then she continued with her insults. "How thick-skinned you are. Stabbing John in the back 20 years ago and now accompanying him is truly funny." Straining to push the tip of the sword forward, but Kevin was powerless. He couldn't understand why that guy was just a puppet of the holy man yet possessed such strength.